Spring started slow this year, with rain and cloud-covered days that went on for weeks. But while that was going on, under the branches of the forest, almost imperceptibly, the growth of the plants was accelerating until a moment when all that humidity in the soil and that natural moment of fastest growth caught the warmth and the sun of late April days, and there was this dramatic burst of growth. I find it amazing and kind of ridiculous too how fast these plants can grow. We're talking growth the size of what I've grown in my entire life within a month or two. And what I find interesting here is that it all fills me with the sense that maybe play is the natural companion of growth. Same as us when we're growing up, because all this growth really does seem so playful. You know, the birds returning and then ramping up their singing, the light beginning to play through the fresh leaves, the flowers, the flowers, do I have to say anything? It's like there's a movie playing all day and then you can just sit around and watch everyone move, transform, and just grow. It's pretty obvious to say that spring is about growth, but it's so undeniable. As like from one day to the next, everything pops. And this year, exaggerating that experience, I had to go away for 2 weeks right at the moment of peak growth. And when I came back, it was just amazing. It's like, to some degree, I'd almost forgotten how like a jungle this place can be. And it was a really pleasant shock to my system to walk around and see the whole place so different. Species that had been little more than seedlings when I left were proper plants. Species that had died back in winter had taken off. And there's this bit of chaos to it all, as it's all kind of happening at the same time. There's all these flowers still around, and there's plenty of flowers who've already fallen away to reveal these little balls that'll grow and mature into fruit and nuts, while at the same time, we're eating the first fruit of the year and spotting trees who've never produced before ripening their first crop. Speaking of which, it's so much fun to sit somewhere you don't usually sit and then happen to look around and see fruit in places you've never seen fruit before. And then you get to remembering the whole life of the tree, from the volunteers who helped plant them some random afternoon 7 years ago, or mulching them countless times, cutting them out of the blackberry, and then watching them grow over our head, and now to have mulberries. It's all such a luxury. Being honest though, it's all very beautiful, but there's also this undercurrent of discomfort in me as well that doesn't really let me fully enjoy it. Spring brings 12-hour days when I'm still lazy from winter and my body's not used to that much movement. And there's how I think this amount of growth in anyone is uncomfortable. Person, plant, doesn't really matter because transformation is tiring, and I think we can feel that to a certain degree. But the largest part of the discomfort comes from a cultural baggage and plays out in how my to-do list grows longer every time a plant grows. You know, eventually I'll be mulching them all back to the ground, and there's also paths to cut, blackberries to trim, gardens to weed, trees to mulch, last year's stalks to break down. And none of that's too bad, except when someone visits and it's not done yet, all of a sudden I'm feeling my parents' anxiety, like, oh no, it's not clean, oh guy, I have to cut this all, I gotta get it done. Oh. And all of a sudden there's the stress of having to get things done, this critique of myself if it doesn't happen, and it all plays out in my parents' voice and judgment, and it makes it so I can't really enjoy the work or just act from the pleasure of being able to do the right thing at the right moment. And even though I don't logically agree with any of this stuff, I can't help that I've been taught that it's a mistake to let nature express themselves, and that information is coded in the stress in my body. And I can't help that I feel that if the paths aren't clear, then I'm not good. And it really plays out interestingly, because after those 2 weeks, when I got back and all the paths had disappeared, I was in the awe of how amazing and beautiful everything was, but I was also in this stress of like, gotta do the thing, gotta get it done. And I get it, because paths are important, because it can even be a bit disorienting and stressful when you're out in a field and there's no paths and you're looking for one and you know it's around, but you can't quite find it, so you end up stepping in the wrong place and it's all a bit stressful. But if you really think about that for more than a little bit, that's fun. It's fun that paths disappear. It's fun that the land is like a moving maze, and it's fun to be reminded how alive everything is. And that's the space I really like to be in, because there's so many little things that I love about this part of the year. Like these tunnels forming in the forest around the paths, or these unplanned clearings that just kind of happened in the space between the trees, where everything feels new and full of potential and creates this warm and intimate feeling that's kind of like being hugged by nature. I love the chorus of birds returning from migration and filling the forest with their amazing chatter. I love seeing all the layers of a forest emerge so you can see the full structure of how they all cohabit and share their space. I loved returning late at night after those 2 weeks and being met with the smell of the forest, the wild fennel, the moist earth, the pollen, the flowers, and they're all mixed up on the air. I love the burst of growth that spring brings, and I also love that pleasing, steady state of growth that happens after the majority of herbaceous plants reach their maximum flowering height. The grasses throw out their seeds, and they all start to fall over each other with their combined weight. Because it's fun to re-explore these old spaces you haven't seen since autumn, and somehow you've forgotten about. Or discover things like this baby fire salamander living in an old tire a neighbor abandoned on our land, and remembering that day a few months back when you saw an adult fire salamander sitting in that same pool, probably giving birth now that you think back. And if I let myself, I even love those to-dos because they're fun. It's enjoyable to help the hedges take shape and paths appear through the lush growth. It's fun to put your hands in soil and then see the gardens you've weeded grow. And it's all enough to instill this idea in you that maybe the forest's real medicine is just fun.